Hello everybody, welcome. Welcome to the joy of cooking with Michelle. It's so nice to see you today, and I wanted to let you know that we are making one of my favorite soups today, minestrone soup. I have created a 4-step process to explain the best way to cook this soup, and I got a head start already. When I think about it, it's probably a 5-step process. So the first step is to chop everything up. And basically everything's chopped the same size except for the potatoes. So what I've done, step 1, I'm going to show you. So what we need for this recipe, I'm going to include all the ingredients and the steps in the 4-part system so that you can see the amounts and also the ingredients that we need. So I could go through it all with you. I want to show you what I'm up to already. This, so nice. Check this out. This is the first step. So what I used was carrots, celery, onions, and garlic. So those are the first 4 ingredients. What we do is we chop those up pretty small, not really fine, but small. You could see the size when I showed you. And we saute that for about 5 minutes in 2 tablespoons of oil. So when we think of minestrone soup, we think that there's always certain ingredients. And those ingredients over there, the carrots, the celery, the onions, and the garlic, are 4 of the 6 main ingredients that is always found in minestrone soup. The other 2 ingredients are pasta and tomatoes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the other ingredients. The pasta. Now what we use also in the end, these last 2 ingredients. And this is the game changer. This is balsamic vinegar and Swiss chard. So the 2 interesting ingredients that are in this recipe are the balsamic vinegar and the refried beans. So what I've done is, a friend of mine was telling me about this consumer report that came out recently. And what they've done in the consumer report is they've done a whole look behind the scenes at canned minestrone soup. And what they did was they made also a homemade minestrone soup in their own kitchen and compared them. So I've collected from the Consumer Report website that recipe. And then I went to my favorite website, which is Epicurious, so epicurious.com, and I grabbed one of the all-time favorite recipes from there, and I've blended these 2. So I also have canned tomatoes, tomato sauce, refried beans, Italian seasoning, some broth if you don't have time to make your own by simmering your own vegetables and saving your broth. You can buy low sodium vegetable broth, some potatoes, zucchini, corn, green beans, kidney beans, a little bit of parsley, and some fresh parm. So let's go through this again. What I've done is I'm going to go over here and grab my sauteed vegetables that I've started with. You can see them. The carrots, celery, onions, and garlic. So I've sauteed them in 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And I wanted to do that ahead of time and show you this is step 1. So I'm just going to put it into, you need a big stock pot to do this recipe. So there we go. That's a good start. Now, I'm going to put my move on. And then step 2, what we do is we use our broth. Now we need, it says for the broth, we need about 5 to 6 cups of broth. So this is 1 liter. Okay, so 1 liter is 4 cups in 1 liter. So it's just shy of 1 liter. So I need at least 1 of these and probably a half. So that's what I'm gonna do. And the other thing is, say you have only a liter of broth or 900 mils. I think this is 900 mils, which is really close to 4 cups. The other thing you could do is you could add 4 cups of broth and just 1 cup of water if you really needed to. I like the extra nutrients that the stock broth will give us, and I probably use slightly more than half of that. If you don't think you're going to use the other half, just throw it in. Why not? It's very hearty. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 liters. It's a little bit more than you need. You need 5 to 6 cups. Now, the other thing we're going to do is, we're going to add a certain group of ingredients. So we have the potatoes. We're going to add the potatoes. We need Italian seasoning. Now the recipe calls for separately oregano and thyme. I'm a big fan, like we spoke about last time, of the Italian seasoning because it's all together, and what I love about it is it's dried. It's a really nice blend of spices. So we need 1.5 teaspoons. So I'm just going to add that to my soup stock. And what else do we need? Tomatoes. Now, a can of tomatoes, this is like a typical 28 ounce can of tomatoes. And that's what it calls for, 28 ounces of diced tomatoes. I found this at the store. I think I've showed you this before. I really like this because it's a no added salt version. And it says Smart Life. 99 cents at Food Basics. So use everything, the juice and everything in it. Oh, fantastic. Okay. So the other thing this calls for is 1 cup of tomato sauce. So I've got 1 cup of tomato sauce here. I'm going to add that. Fantastic. The interesting ingredient that we were talking about earlier is the refried beans. So it calls for 1.5 cups of refried beans. The cool thing, I was reading the ingredients because I think maybe I've only ever bought refried beans once before. And I know a lot of people use them on nachos and different Mexican foods that they're making. This is really going to give some robustness to the stock. It's going to make it a little thicker, which will be really nice. Oh, it's looking good already. So that's our second step, is to add the seasoning. Oh, a little bit of pepper. Now the recipe calls for a pinch of salt. My thinking is between the tomato sauce and the broth, because the broth sometimes can have quite a bit of sodium in it. So when you're looking for your broth, make sure you're looking for something that's at least 15% daily value or less. There's a lot that's 30 or more. So again, that magic number is 15% daily value of the sodium. So because the broth tends to be already high in sodium, I'm not going to add salt, because what I can do is I can add salt at the table. So I've added the tomato sauce, I've added the broth, the refried beans, and the potatoes. So 1.5 cups of refried beans and 2 small potatoes. That's what I say. The recipe in Epicurious had potato fingerlings. Well, it's not something that we always might find is potato fingerlings. So I thought that would be equivalent to about 2 small potatoes. So what I'm gonna do is mix that all up. Oh my gosh, it's looking fantastic already. Love that. And we're going to put it on the stove to cook for 25 minutes. So it doesn't have to go to a rolling boil, but you might want to bring it up so it starts simmering and then turn it down. So it's going to cook on medium heat for about 25 minutes. Don't be too worried if you end up leaving it for half an hour or 40 minutes. It's not going to be the end of the world. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to put it on medium heat. So that's step 2. Like I said, that has to cook for 25 minutes approximately. Now, step 3, once that's finished cooking, of course, we're not going to get to step 3, but I want to explain to you what step 3 is going to be. While that's simmering, what you will do is you will chop up a small zucchini, and you will get 1 can, a regular size can, 19-ounce can of kidney beans, and drain those. Like rinse them out under the sink, under the water, and drain them, drain all the water off of them. You don't want all that extra fluid. So kidney beans and corn. So this recipe has 3/4 of a cup of frozen corn in it. Delicious. I love that they're using some frozen vegetables because for convenience and availability, and it's very nutritious. And most of us have frozen corn in the freezer. They did call for a whole cup of green beans. So it's hard to find really good fresh green beans in Canada in the middle of winter. So what I've done is I had a mixture of green and yellow beans frozen in my freezer. So what I did was I took those out, you can see, and I cut them up into 1-inch pieces. So that's what I'm going to use. So the reason they let that cook for 25 minutes already is that these things, once we add it, it's only going to take another 15-20 minutes to simmer some more. So we let that cook for 20-25 minutes. Then once that time is up, then what we do is we add these 4 ingredients: the kidney beans, the zucchini that we've diced up, the corn, and the beans. So once that's done, then we cook that 20 minutes. Then the most fun part is the balsamic vinegar that we add and the pasta. And the recipe says you can use either spinach or Swiss chard. So I chose Swiss chard because I don't cook with Swiss chard very often. And the thing I love about it is that this is an opportunity for me to use it. So it's 2 cups of Swiss chard, 1 cup of pasta. But here's the trick, is that the pasta, what you're going to do is cook it up ahead of time. So I've pre-cooked my pasta, and once we cook this for 20 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to add these 3 ingredients. And you're only using a teaspoon of this balsamic vinegar. And this is really interesting. This is a very Italian thing to do, more than we know. A really good friend of mine told me recently that that's a secret ingredient when she makes her tomato sauce, is to add a little bit of vinegar. And when I was on Epicurious, this is what they said, to use a teaspoon of the balsamic vinegar. So I'm really excited to try this. Once we add these, after this has cooked for another 20 minutes, then we're only cooking this for about 10 minutes because the pasta's already cooked and we don't want it to get soggy. And what we're doing is really heating it through and making it so that the Swiss chard is wilted. We don't want to overcook the pasta or the Swiss chard. That's why we're only adding this at the very end. So then we'll continue to cook it an extra 10 minutes and then boom, it'll be ready. Then what we do is, after those 10 minutes are finished, then the suggestion is that we use, to garnish on top your lovely bowl of minestrone soup, just a little sprig of chopped up parsley and a little bit of Parmesan. So it's nice if we get some fresh parm and then we can just put a little bit on top. Or if you don't have any fresh parm, you probably could use some grated parm. So that's the way it's served in the end. So I love this recipe. I'm going to put the exact 4-step method in all the ingredients and all the volumes that you need. I want you to know there's a great history of minestrone soup. And the key things about the minestrone soup is the tubatini. So the tubatini is the pasta that is typically used when we're making minestrone. Sometimes you might see elbow pasta used, but the tubatini is the thing that's really popular. And I love this. You can get this at Food Basics. I just happen to have some already. The other pasta, ditalini, is also popular when it comes to making minestrone soup. And I'll show you up close so you can see it almost looks like macaroni, the elbow macaroni that's been chopped up into 2 or 3 pieces. So they're just small tubes. So little small tubes, see? So that is the special pasta, and very famous. The history of the minestrone soup is going back hundreds of years. When Rome invaded Italy, this became the soup that was the most popular. And this is when it really became popular. It was actually called the poor man's soup, because what the Italians would do, because they were just scraping by trying to make a go of it, you know, because their country was being taken over, but they always had those 6 ingredients that we spoke about before. And what they often would do is just use the leftovers from the meal before and then make their soup out of it. So this has a really rich history. It's so exciting. And so in southern Italy, this is where this type of pasta came about. And this is where the tradition has just carried on. So I'm not Italian, but I love Italian food, and I wanted to share this with you. I hope you've enjoyed this recipe as much as I have. This is going to cook for another few more minutes, and then I'm going to go on to the next stage and add these 4 ingredients that we spoke about. And I'm so excited for this to be finished so that I can eat some. So thank you so much. So nice to see you, and I'll see you again next Monday, 8 o'clock. Thank you for joining me. Bye.